Imagine owing someone so much money that you'd rather burn down the world than keep paying. That's not hyperbole. That's exactly what happened between 1919 and 1939. International bankers chasing World War I debts worth over $400 billion in today's money created a financial trap so devastating it helped trigger World War II. And here's the shocking part. Most people have no idea this happened. We're told World War II started because of Hitler's aggression, Versailles Treaty humiliation, or fascist ideology. And yes, those factors mattered. But follow the money, and you'll discover something darker. A web of debt, reparations, and gold flows orchestrated by American and British bankers that strangled Germany's economy, destabilized Europe, and made another global conflict almost inevitable. The bankers didn't want war, they wanted their money. But their collection methods created a powder keg that exploded into the deadliest conflict in human history. In the next few minutes, you're going to learn how Wall Street banks loaned billions to keep a broken system alive, how the gold standard became a financial weapon, and how the same debt patterns that destroyed the 1930s are quietly rebuilding today. Before we dive into this story, I need to ask a favor. If you're fascinated by the economic events that shaped history while most people weren't paying attention, please hit that like button and subscribe to The Sleeping Economist. We uncover the financial mysteries behind world-changing events, and trust me, this is one story they definitely didn't teach you in school. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Chapter 1. The biggest IOU in history. Let's set the stage. November 11th, 1918, World War I ends. Europe lies in ruins. 10 million soldiers dead. Empires collapsed. Economies shattered. And someone has to pay for it all. Enter the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. The Allied powers, Britain, France, Italy, and America gathered in Paris with one mission: make Germany pay. Not just for their own war costs, but for everything. The treaty demanded Germany accept full blame for the war and pay reparations. The initial bill? 132 billion gold marks, equivalent to roughly $442 billion today. For context, Germany's entire annual economic output in 1919 was only about 20% of that amount. They were being asked to pay more than 5 times their GDP. This wasn't justice. This was financial assassination. But here's where the bankers enter the picture. Britain and France weren't demanding reparations out of pure vengeance. They were desperate. During World War I, they borrowed massive sums from American banks, particularly J.P. Morgan and National City Bank. Britain owed the United States $4.7 billion. France owed $4 billion. In total, Allied war debts to America exceeded $10 billion, about $180 billion in today's dollars. The Allied logic was simple. Germany pays us, we pay America, everyone's happy. But there was a catastrophic problem. Germany was broke. Their economy had been obliterated. Their currency, the mark, was collapsing. They couldn't possibly pay. And if Germany couldn't pay, Britain and France couldn't pay America. And if they couldn't pay America, the biggest banks on Wall Street were holding worthless IOUs. The bankers' victims weren't just Germany. They were ordinary people across Europe who would suffer through the economic chaos this debt trap created. And the amount at stake? Over $400 billion in interconnected debts, all depending on squeezing money from a nation that had nothing left to give. The stage was set. The famous players. Wall Street's most powerful bankers. The dramatic action. Engineering financial schemes to keep the debt payments flowing. The victims, Germany, and eventually the entire world. The cost, hundreds of billions of dollars, and ultimately 70 million lives. Chapter 2. Lending into the abyss. By 1923, Germany was in free fall. Unable to meet reparation payments, they'd started printing money. Hyperinflation exploded. A loaf of bread cost billions of marks. People carried wheelbarrows of cash to buy groceries. The German middle class saw their life savings evaporate overnight. Political extremism grew in the chaos. This should have been a wake-up call to cancel the debts. Instead, the bankers doubled down. Enter the Dawes Plan of 1924, named after American banker Charles Dawes. Wall Street banks, led by J.P. Morgan, engineered a scheme. They would loan Germany the money to pay reparations to Britain and France, who would then use that money to repay their debts to America. Read that again. American banks would loan Germany money to pay other countries, who would pay that same money back to American banks. It was a circular flow. Money left Wall Street, went to Germany, then to France and Britain, then back to Wall Street. The banks collected interest at every stage. It was financial genius or elaborate Ponzi scheme, depending on your perspective. From 1924 to 1929, American investors poured $2.5 billion into German bonds and loans, about $44 billion today. Cities like New York and Chicago marketed German municipal bonds to ordinary Americans. Midwestern school teachers bought them thinking they were safe investments. The money flowed to Germany. Germany paid reparations. Britain and France paid their war debts, and everyone pretended the system was sustainable. But there were warning signs everywhere. German economists warned their economy was being hollowed out, taking on new debt to pay old debt, while their industrial base couldn't grow. British economist John Maynard Keynes had predicted this disaster in his 1919 book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, calling the reparations a Carthaginian peace designed to destroy Germany permanently. Even some American bankers privately admitted the scheme couldn't last. The tension was building. Germany was now in debt to both its war victims and its Wall Street lenders. The Young Plan of 1929 restructured the debt again, extending payments until 1988, yes, 60 years of debt servitude. Germany's total obligations now exceeded $120 billion in current value. The bankers kept lending, the debt kept growing, and the gold standard, the system requiring currencies to be backed by gold reserves, became the chain that would strangle everyone. Chapter 3. When the music stopped, October 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed. The Great Depression began, and suddenly the circular flow of money stopped. American investors, who'd been pouring money into German bonds, went broke. They stopped lending. The flow of dollars to Germany dried up instantly. Without new American loans, Germany couldn't make reparation payments. Without German reparations, Britain and France couldn't service their American war debts. The entire Rube Goldberg machine seized up. But here's the critical part most people miss. The gold standard turned an economic crisis into a death spiral. Under the gold standard rules, when countries lost gold reserves, which happened when debts couldn't be paid, they had to contract their money supply. Less money meant deflation, falling wages, business failures, and mass unemployment. Germany, chained to the gold standard and crushed by unpayable debts, saw unemployment explode from 1.3 million in 1929 to over 6 million by 1932, to 30% of their workforce. Banks collapsed. Businesses shuttered. Middle-class families who'd already lost everything in the 1923 hyperinflation now lost everything again. Britain and France, desperately trying to collect from Germany while paying America, imposed brutal austerity on their own populations. France's economy contracted by 15%. Britain's unemployment hit 20%. The gold standard, which was supposed to maintain stability, became a straitjacket preventing any recovery. And the bankers? They demanded their money. J.P. Morgan and other major banks pressured the U.S. government to force Britain and France to keep paying war debts. Britain and France, in turn, demanded Germany keep paying reparations. Everyone was drowning, and everyone kept pulling each other underwater, trying to save themselves. The breaking point came in 1931. Austria's largest bank, Credit Anstalt, collapsed under the weight of unpayable debts. The panic spread. German banks failed in waves. Britain abandoned the gold standard in September 1931, a shocking admission they couldn't maintain the system. By 1933, the entire international financial order had collapsed. The dramatic action the bankers had taken creating a system of circular debts all pegged to gold flows had just destroyed the global economy. And in Germany, the political victim of this disaster, a failed artist named Adolf Hitler, was about to take power, promising to end the debt slavery and restore German pride. Chapter 4. The Price of Collection. The immediate impact was catastrophic. Germany's economy imploded. Real wages fell 30% between 1929 and 1932. Industrial production dropped by 40%. Children went hungry. Disease spread. And politically, the chaos created the perfect conditions for extremism. In 1930, Hitler's Nazi Party had only 12 seats in the Reichstag. By July 1932, they had 230, the largest party in Germany. Why? Because Hitler promised one thing above all else. He would stop paying the debts. He would reject Versailles. He would end the financial humiliation. And desperate, impoverished Germans, destroyed by banker-engineered debt traps, listened. Hitler took power in January 1933. Within months, he suspended reparations payments. Germany defaulted. The exact dollar amount of unpaid debts? Approximately $23 billion in today's values still owed when Germany stopped paying money that Wall Street banks and allied governments would never fully recover. But the fallout extended far beyond Germany. The entire interconnected debt system collapsed. American banks lost billions on German bonds. Cities and states across America had invested pension funds in those bonds gone. Britain and France, unable to collect from Germany, defaulted on their American war debts in 1933. France never paid another cent. Britain made token payments until 1934, then stopped. The famous Wall Street bankers who had engineered this system, the J.P. Morgan partners, the National City Bank executives, lost their shirts. But they didn't lose as much as the ordinary people who'd bought the bonds they marketed. Midwestern school teachers, small-town investors, pension funds all holding worthless German paper. The rival banks in Britain and France fared no better. They'd lent to their own governments, who'd lent to Germany, who couldn't pay. The Bank of England nearly collapsed. French banks required government bailouts. The international banking system, which in 1924 had seemed so clever with its circular debt flows, lay in ruins by 1933. And in Germany, the victim of this entire scheme, unemployment, poverty, and humiliation had created a monster. Hitler's government began rebuilding the military. The Treaty of Versailles was openly violated, and the world, exhausted and broke, did nothing. They couldn't. The same debt crisis that had empowered Hitler had also bankrupted the countries that might have stopped him. The exact cost of the bankers' collection methods? By 1939, when World War II began, the economic destruction of the 1930s had cost the global economy approximately $4 trillion in lost production in today's terms. And the war itself would kill 70 million people and cost another $4 trillion. All of it traceable back to unpayable World War I debts and the bankers who kept the system alive long enough to destroy everything. Chapter 5. The Debt That Broke the World. World War II ended in 1945, and here's the remarkable thing. The victorious Allies learned absolutely nothing until one economist made them. In the immediate aftermath, some voices wanted to repeat Versailles. Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau proposed reducing Germany to a pre-industrial agricultural society, the ultimate debt collection. But this time, cooler heads prevailed, largely because of one lesson that finally sank in. Unpayable debts destroy everyone. Instead, America created the Marshall Plan. Rather than demanding Germany and Japan pay for World War II, America loaned and gave them $13 billion, about $173 billion today, to rebuild. Debts were forgiven. Reparations were minimal. The entire philosophy reversed. And it worked. Germany and Japan became economic powerhouses and stable democracies. But the financial mysteries from the interwar period didn't end cleanly. Germany didn't finish paying World War I reparations until October 3, 2010, yes, 91 years after Versailles. The final payment? 70 million euros, about $94 million. Total amount paid over nearly a century? Approximately $60 billion in inflation-adjusted dollars, only a fraction of the original $442 billion demanded. The American banks never recovered their 1920s loans to Germany. Total losses to American investors from German bond defaults exceeded $1.2 billion in 1930s dollars, about $27 billion today. Add British and French war debts that were never fully repaid, and American institutions lost well over $200 billion in current value. Britain didn't finish repaying its World War II debts to America until 2006. France, notably, never finished paying World War I debts and still technically owes money, though no one's collecting. But here's the deeper aftermath that should concern us today. The pattern didn't disappear. The 2008 financial crisis followed a similar script over leveraged debts, circular flows of money, financial engineering masking insolvency. The European debt crisis of 2010 to 2015, particularly Greece's situation, echoed the reparations trap. Unpayable debts, austerity demanded by creditors, economic collapse, political extremism rising. The lesson was available in 1945, and it's available now. When debts become unpayable, collecting them destroys more value than forgiving them. But that lesson requires creditors to accept losses. Banks don't like accepting losses. Neither do governments who lent money. So the same pattern persists. Nations take on debts to solve immediate problems. The debts grow unsustainable. Creditors demand payment anyway. Economic chaos follows. Political extremism flourishes. And sometimes, eventually, violence erupts. The total amount involved in the World War I debt trap combining German reparations, Allied war debts, and the circular bank loans of the 1920s exceeded $400 billion in today's values. The attempt to collect that money cost 70 million lives in World War II and $4 trillion in war costs. By any rational measure, the debt should have been forgiven in 1919. But rationality rarely governs when money's involved. Chapter 6. The Echoes We Ignore. So what can we learn from this financial mystery that most people slept through? First, the obvious lesson. Unpayable debts don't get paid. They get defaulted on, inflated away, or fought over. The harder creditors squeeze, the more they destroy the debtor's ability to ever pay. Germany in the 1920s couldn't pay because the reparations were impossible. The loans from Wall Street didn't help. Germany grew, they temporarily masked insolvency while making the eventual collapse worse. Second, circular debt flows are warning signs. When money moves from creditor A to debtor B to creditor C to creditor A, and everyone calls it payments, you don't have a functioning economy, you have a shell game. The moment new money stops flowing in, the entire structure collapses. We saw this in 2008 with mortgage-backed securities and derivatives. We're seeing it now with corporate debt and quantitative easing. Third, the gold standard lesson applies to any inflexible monetary system. Whether it's gold, fixed exchange rates, or rigid currency unions, looking at you, euro. When economic systems can't adjust to shocks, the adjustment happens through unemployment, poverty, and political chaos instead. The 1930s proved that preserving the monetary system is worthless if it destroys the actual economy. Fourth, Bankers are not villains in a comic book. The men at J.P. Morgan and National City Bank weren't evil, they were doing what bankers do, trying to get repaid. But their institutional role protected the value of outstanding loans conflicted with what was economically necessary, write down unpayable debts. This structural conflict still exists. Banks today are still highly leveraged, still dependent on loans being repaid, still incentivized to extend bad debts rather than recognize losses. Fifth, political extremism grows in economic despair. Hitler didn't rise because Germans were uniquely evil. He rose because they were desperate, impoverished, and humiliated conditions created directly by the debt trap and deflationary spiral. When people lose everything, they become willing to follow anyone promising radical solutions. We've seen this pattern throughout history, and we're watching it resurface now in multiple countries experiencing economic stress. The current relevance should terrify you. Global debt, government, corporate, and household combined now exceeds $315 trillion, more than 3 times global GDP. Developed economies are sustaining themselves through perpetually low interest rates and central bank money printing. Developing nations are borrowing in foreign currencies they can't print, just like Germany was trapped in gold. The system works only as long as interest rates stay low and new money keeps flowing. What happens when it stops? We've run this experiment before. We know the answer. The warning signs are everywhere. Rising nationalism, trade wars, political polarization, authoritarian movements gaining ground, wealth inequality at levels not seen since, you guessed it, the 1920s. None of this is coincidence. These are the symptoms of an over-leveraged, financially unstable system approaching a breaking point. So what do you do with this knowledge? First, understand that debt-fueled growth has limits. Whether it's personal debt, corporate debt, or government debt, borrowed prosperity isn't real prosperity. It's future consumption pulled forward. Eventually, the bill comes due. Second, watch what central banks and major financial institutions do, not what they say. When they're desperately keeping interest rates near zero despite inflation, when they're buying assets to prevent price collapses, when they're engineering liquidity to prevent defaults, they're in crisis management mode, just like the 1920s. Third, understand history. The interwar period isn't ancient history. It's a blueprint for how modern financial systems collapse. The specific mechanisms change, but the pattern remains. Excessive debt, circular financial flows, inflexible monetary systems, creditors refusing to accept losses, and ultimately, economic and political catastrophe. The bankers didn't want World War II. They wanted their $400 billion in debts repaid. But their efforts to collect triggered a chain reaction that killed 70 million people and cost $4 trillion more than the original debts. The greatest irony? They never got paid anyway. That's the lesson. Sometimes the cost of collection exceeds the value of the debt. And when that's true, the rational choice is forgiveness. But rationality and banking rarely coexist during a crisis. If stories like this, where we uncover the economic events that shaped our world while most people weren't paying attention, fascinate you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we're just getting started with these financial, educational mysteries.